Everyone, it's Brian here for Yes You Can Play Guitar, and I'm with my good friend and big friend of our channel, The Solitary Adventurer, and it's our absolute pleasure today, our absolute pleasure to have the one and only Dave Rusan, builder of the Cloud Guitar, here with us. All the Prince fans know about the Cloud Guitar, but he's a luthier, guitar maker, guitar repairs, everything. We got lots to talk about today. Welcome, Dave, so much. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to have you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to sort of just go right back to the beginning. I've seen several interviews with you over the years, but one thing that we never really get to hear about is your beginnings. So, are you Minnesota born and bred?
Yes, I was born in St. Cloud, a medium-sized town about 60 miles north of Minneapolis. Nice town to grow up in, not too big, not too small. Yeah,
And
cold a lot.
yeah, when did you sort of migrate into the city, into Minneapolis, St. Paul?
In my mid-20s, I looking for more musicians to play with, better opportunities. It was,
Wow.
a lot more people to meet, more clubs to play, and it seemed like the thing to do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Dave, what,
So,
what what got what got you into guitar? What were your influences?
Well, I love the Beatles, and I just I had how people when they accomplish something, they see themselves doing it, and then all they have to do is get the skills and make it happen. And I could see myself playing for my high school classmates and having the girls be impressed. And I thought, well, and I just love music. And I just thought, I got to get the guitar. I got to do it. And I already had music in my head. It wasn't like a pastime. It was like I had musical thoughts and I had to get them out.
it's probably a good time for me to tell you that I'm in Liverpool, so the home of the Beatles.
Oh, yes, I spent
Yeah.
a lovely weekend there. I even got to hear Gary Gibson. You know who he
Okay.
is? The
I've heard
world's
of the name.
greatest
I've
Lennon
never seen it.
impersonator. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, I had a lovely weekend there in the 80s. Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I was just going to say, I know that you spent some time in England at the start of
Oh,
the
yeah.
80s, and I'm sure we'll
Yeah,
get there.
about a year.
But it's nice
I
that you
spent
made the
about a year.
pilgrimage to Liverpool.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I went with a tour bus of American tourists, but they all, after the tours were over during the day, they all just hung around together in the Holiday Inn at night, and I went out on my own, and I met a guy that was a fireman in Penny Lane. I
Wow.
went from pub to pub. I had just a hell of a good time.
So,
Yeah.
Dave, how old were you when you actively started pursuing the guitar and started learning, practicing, taking lessons, all that stuff?
About 14. Yeah. I had a teacher for about a year. He was not a good rock player. He was a good chord melody jazz guy.
Okay.
He really couldn't play rock all that well, but he right away he made me learn a lot of chords, which served me well. I still remember them all too. It
Yeah.
was the Mel Bay orchestral chord method, it was called,
Oh
and
my God,
he
I remember
drilled
Mel
me in that
Bay.
thing.
Did uh,
Yeah, yeah.
did you have to learn how to read notation right off the bat?
Yeah, I had the, yeah, I did, some teachers frowned on rock and roll. A lot of it wasn't that good, to be honest, but some was, and I loved everything. I even had BB King albums and Muddy Waters albums because people said I should get them, and so I listened to that stuff too right away.
So, what was your when you at that point in your playing? What was your favorite guitar? Like, what was your favorite guitar? Like, what shape, brand?
Well, my first one was a Gibson ES 330, a one pickup used, and I just liked the thin line kind of guitar. So then my dad, as I got better, he bought me an ES 345, and those appealed to me a lot. I didn't get into Fenders until I was well into my 20s. It was kind of funny in St. Cloud. There weren't any Fender dealers. Everything was Gibson and Gretsch, and
Okay.
that so they were kind of somewhat foreign to me, and I mean, I knew they existed, but I was a Gibson guy and I loved the thin lines.
So you mentioned earlier about having the, musical thoughts in your head and needing the tool set to get them out. How long did it take after you started learning before you could actually get them out of your your imagination?
Well, I worked pretty fast. I even wrote songs right away. I learned some Dick Dale stuff and accompanied the school choirs. A girl from Ipanema, some jazz stuff. I had all those chords under my belt really quick because that guy really wanted me to learn that stuff. And I thought, well, I guess I'll do that. And then I got in a little band. Boy, it was probably terrible. I had to teach the bass player how to play. He didn't even have a bass. He just played guitar and turned the tone down. And, but I loved the Beatles. I wanted to reproduce that stuff. When you love a song, it's so exciting to recreate it with your friends. Boy, I just thought that was the greatest thing. I became known at school because I wasn't into sports. I became known as the guy that played guitar.
So
it felt good.
We're going to keep going with the timeline, of course. We have a lot of interesting things to talk about. But I just want, as a guitar player, I want to ask you this. I always struggled with funk music, like does the right hand with a certain type of 16th notes with the groove and everything. I'm still not that great at it. It was something I had to kind of work at just to be passable. Is that something you got into or were naturally adept at doing?
No, that would be
so it's not just me, Dave. It's not just me.
No. I wasn't relaxed enough. I was not a relaxed kind of guy. Mm-hmm. In fact, I developed some tendinitis problems and stuff just because I couldn't relax. And I didn't have a teacher that looked at the big picture. It was like, here's a chord, here's a lick, but nobody said, well, look at your hand position. Look, what are you thinking about when you play? Your hands, your arms, they're not looking natural. You got using too much pressure in your left hand. I didn't have anybody that was like a good coach,
Yeah. I think part of it, and it's something I'm probably going to touch future on in my channel. I've had a lot of success with teaching over the years, but there's some people that teach to live, and then there's some teachers that live to teach. And unfortunately, there's a lot of teachers out there that they just teach to live, and it's just really just a job to them. Maybe that's kind of what you went through as well.
Well, the guy, he did spend too much time showing off to me, things that I would be impressed with, but it would be so beyond me that he was kind of amusing himself at my own expense a little bit,
Yeah.
And then I didn't take any more lessons, although I had later I had college theory, a couple of years of that. Boy, everybody else thought it was boring. I thought it was fantastic. All of a sudden, I was learning about how music worked. Mm-hmm. And that helped me a lot. Interval training every day.
Yeah.
I got to learn. Now I don't need the guitar I can mentally jam. I don't need the guitar to play really. Even I can see where everything is. If I can't sleep at night, I make up a lick and then I play it in every key in my head and in different octaves. And so I don't really need the guitar. I mean, I like to play, but I'm so busy I hardly ever get a chance. But I can do it. I actually can. It's amazingly satisfying that way too. Yeah. I had a nap today and I jammed in E and played all my country licks.
What is it about Minnesota that there's so many musically talented people? Because this doesn't sound normal to me as a non-guitar player, that somebody, could have that fertile a mind. Do you think that there's something special about Minnesota?
Yeah. It could be that we don't get outside much half of the year, and in fact, Prince said that was part of the reason that they practice so much.
Yeah.
To me,
the cold kept you in.
Yeah, a lot of my customers, not to be critical at all, but there's some where they're more collectors or people that enjoy the technology, but some of them they don't think of it. What I think it's a tool. In other words, if you have musical thoughts, the guitar is how people in a room enjoy them and know that you have them. And I don't see a lot of people looking at the ultimate goal of playing. You know, it's either the equipment a lot of times or technique without that goal in mind. You know,
Yeah.
and I was lucky to have all that theory and the especially the ear training. So I can learn while I'm working. I have the stereo on. If I hear a lick I like, I'm able to, I'm not bragging, but I can ignore what had come after that lick as though the music stopped, and I can think about what the notes were and what it was played over and go, oh yeah, oh, you know. So
You know, I have a
No.
saying that I tell everyone. I learned this from a guy who, in my area, he was a very busy working musician. Because people really do get caught up in the gear and the new effects, and now with all the stuff, you know, I don't want to spend a week of programming. It's like my philosophy is a good amp, a few pedals, you know, a good guitar in your fingers. You know, like, so I know some guys, I'm like, dude, if you'd spend a third of that time practicing that you do noodling around with your new toys all the time, you'd be a better player. But I find it's really crazy now how a lot of people just seem to be chasing their tail with gear all the time.
yeah, some of them do enjoy it an awful lot. I
Yeah,
guess if
and
they're
that's
having
fair. That's
fun,
fair.
as
Yeah,
long as they understand that maybe isn't the means to an end. I have a friend that has the fractal thing, which is amazing, but I
yeah.
know he spends much more time programming it than he does playing. You know,
Bingo, exactly.
Yeah. So in
look at
terms
all
of
the.
bands, sorry.
Excuse me, I was going to say, look at all the amazing players that had pretty ordinary gear that anybody could have bought in the store. You know.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of the people that we revere came from a time where there was no technology. You know,
Oh
like Jimmy
yeah,
Page didn't have much to work with, did he? You know.
or BB King, you had even less.
Yeah. You mentioned the bands that you were in. I mean, were you successful on a local level, and that took you to Minneapolis, or what was the background there?
That was a time when there were a lot of baby boomers that were starting to be at the age that they could go to nightclubs. So there were just a ton of places to play. You could make a lower middle class living just playing 5, 6 nights a week for years on end and never even hardly ever leave town. You know, it was great. You know, you'd have your days off, go to the beach, you practice some, but it just went on for years. You know, all that time on the bandstand. You know, and although it's funny, some of the players, I don't know why some of them got better and some of them really didn't, even with all that playing time. You know, but
Yeah.
it was a time. There was a highway and there was like hotel clubs and nightclubs just for like miles on end, and they'd be packed every night. I mean, that's all gone now, you know. But
Yeah.
it was it was so easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So what sort of time period are we talking about when you make that move to Minneapolis at 20?
That'd be about 1974, and that kind of all the clubs and all that stuff that lasted about 15 years, maybe 20, you know, somewhere in there. And
Yeah.
then laws changed, the drunken driving laws got tougher, and different things that probably should have. And it just kind of, and then, you know, people stay home more. They got the big TVs, and there's a club scene here, but it's not like that anymore, where you can be in one band. I was in a house band. We played the same place for like a year and a half. You know, there's nothing like that anymore.
And was that cover songs or songs that you'd written, or mixture?
Oh no, to do that you'd have to play cover tunes, but they could be ones you liked. That was in one band. We mostly played Steely Dan and the Eagles. You know, that wasn't so bad.
No,
It wasn't
it
Proud
still wouldn't
Mary
be.
all
Yeah.
night. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you make that move to Minneapolis, are you a gigging musician at that time, or do you go and start work at New Coop sort of early on at that point?
Soon after I got to Minneapolis, I went to them, and they needed somebody. There had been what's called the Robin Trower incident, Robin Trower at his peak, I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah, I do.
He
Yeah.
came in there, and one of the store owners kind of thought he was a guitar repairman, but he did something to Robin Trower's guitar that made him so mad that he stormed out of the store. And it was it was bad. So I had been, since high school, I've been working on my own stuff. As soon as I got a guitar, it wasn't just to play. I had to see what was going on inside. My dad got me a new Mosrite, and I looked at that pick guard and I thought, boy, what's under that pick guard? I had to take it off, and just I had to mess with them, kind of like a guy that buys a car not just to drive around to the grocery store, but he wants to get under the hood, So by that time I was doing refrets and stuff, and I started a little shop in the basement of the store, almost within about a year of arriving in Minneapolis.
Okay. Dave, do you? I love guitar. I love playing. I love teaching. I had taken courses on doing setups. I got some guitars with Floyd Roses on them and stuff. It's just over my head. It's something like I have a guitar guy that does all the work for me. When did you find that you just naturally you got it? Like you just gravitated towards that whole other aspect of the guitar, like the construction, the setups, the installing the electron. Like I'm trying to word it right what I'm saying, because it was just something that, especially doing the setups for me, I was just like, what age were you where it just kind of turned into a really strong interest, aside from the playing guitar and playing in bands?
As soon as I got a guitar, I was very sensitive to how it played. Other people could play any guitar, just pick it up and play. To me, if it didn't feel good, I just was so affected by that. And there weren't any really good guitar repairmen, even in Minneapolis, that I could find.
Really?
Once I took a guitar, I had him do a fret level, and I think he stopped with about 80 grit sandpaper, and I'd be doing bends on it, and I'd hear scraping sounds. And I remember thinking, boy, I think I could do better in that. So how it felt and performed really would affect me and how I felt about playing. If guitar didn't play good, I just didn't enjoy it. I was so sensitive to that I had to do something about it. So and there weren't any books. There was a guy in town that was a little bit of a mentor to me, but a lot of it was just trial and error. When I could do something to mine, my friends would say, well, your guitar plays good. Now, how about if you try doing mine, and then when I finally did the first refret, that was a big milestone. I don't know, it probably wasn't any good, the first one. I remember I went to a store, I got some fret wire, and the guy said, do you know how to use this stuff? He kind of gave me a hard time, and I said, well, I'm going to find out. And, and it went pretty good. And it seemed, all along, looking back, it seems like that was what I was meant to do, really. I never get sick of it either.
And you said that you took up the basement at New Coop, so you must have had a few clients and people coming to you at that point.
Yeah, I had a few of my own, and then I had their customers, and it was a fun store. All the other stores in town were owned by guys that were the age of your dad. So it was like you're going to go see your grumpy uncle that buy a guitar. But New Coop, they were the same age as us. They were guys that did gigs at night, and people would hang out there. It was fun. They would do goofy things during the daytime, and and just not be real serious a lot of the time. It was a fun place,
And was there already a thriving music scene at that point?
Yeah, oh yeah. It had been thriving a long time. In the 60s, there was a couple guys that did record jobbing. I don't know if you ever heard that term. It's say you had a little department store. These guys that say, hey, we'll come to your store. We'll set up a record shop, because the Beatles, everything is so big, and we'll supply the records. You get a cut. And then they thought, we're supplying all these records. How about if we make our own? So they got a recording studio in town. They bought it, and they would offer all the local bands a package for like $500. They'd record 2 sides. A and B. They did a box of records to sell at Teen Hops. And every band in town did that. And there were a few hits that come out of that. I don't know if you ever heard of the song Surfin' Bird by the Trashmen. That was a novelty hit. 6 Days on the Road by Dave Dudley was done there. So it was a hot market, you know. The only thing was that Minneapolis was not a town where you would make it. If you had any aspirations to the big time, at some point you'd say, well, it's time to go to LA, you know, before Prince anyway. Well, and then there was the punk kind of scene, Husker Du in the suburbs in the late 70s, but it wasn't a mainstream thing. What's that?
Oh, I remember Husker Du, yeah.
But it was it was a big scene though. There was Replacements, Suicide Commandos. There was a whole bunch of them. But generally, it was a great place to have a gig almost every night. It had a thriving scene, but it was flyover land for the big time.
And were you playing at the same time as running the shop?
Oh yeah, I was burning the candle at both ends. Yeah,
so I have to ask.
Fun. I liked both. You know, it wasn't like going to 2 factory jobs. They were both fun. You know.
Yeah.
So I was doing both. In fact, I was often torn between the two. You know, sometimes I actually quit for a while just because I wanted not to be inside in the summer and then play every night, you know, but I came back to it, you know, and I just enjoy especially the fretwork, something about that. I never get sick of that.
I don't want to jump ahead too far, but did Robin Trower ever come back?
No. No. He went to another store called Pete's Guitars in St. Paul, a guy named Pete Alanoff, who became an internationally known. He sold guitars to everybody from the Stones to the Who. He was one of the first big guitar dealers to rock stars in the world, starting in the early 70s.
Okay.
He was good friends with a guy, what was his name? He was a big guitar roadie for everybody. I can't think of his name. But no, that was the end of Robin Trower and coming into the store.
Yeah.
But if whatever happened it was an ugly scene.
So take us back to that period. You're doing your work in the basement. Are you also helping out in the shop, and are you giving guitar lessons or anything outside of the performing?
I gave some lessons later, but mostly just did the repairs. You know, they had the store was tiny at first. Oh, it was just, I bet the showroom was about 10 by 12 feet. I mean, it was just a tiny little place.
And who would be coming in at that sort of period? You know, anyone other than, you know, the name that we're all going to mention at length today. Were there any other names that came through that we would recognize?
Well, not too many stars at that point. You know, I remember I did go down. Well, I did stuff for. This would be a little later, around the late 70s. I did work for Cliff Richard's band. Cliff came to play.
Okay.
I did work for. Yeah, well, no, it was not the Shadows anymore. It was his backup band for his solo career.
Okay.
You know who Terry Britton is? He was in it. And then I did work, once they sent me on location to a show by Twisted Sister and what is that? A metal band from the 70s and 80s. Well, anyway, there was a couple, it'll come to me in a minute. They're named after a torture device. What was that thing?
Iron Maiden?
It's escaping my mind at the minute. What's that? Iron Maiden. Yeah. They did a double show together, Iron Maiden and Twisted Sister. I went to worked on location on their stuff. There was a guy named Sean Phillips who was a big deal back then, a kind of a folk rock guy, did stuff for him. But it was mostly the working musicians, you know. needed work on their guitars.
I've seen you interview before, and I know that you auditioned for Prince's band when Prince sort of started his solo career. But can you fill in the gap of sort of, was that the first time you'd ever come across Prince, or any of the,
Oh, no,
the people around Prince?
He'd been coming in for years. When he was in high school, he had a big afro, and he'd come in with his first manager, with his friends, and he would play. I remember once he came in and he had a guitar on, and he tapped a melody on with his left hand and played a harmony on a synthesizer at the same time. And everybody knew that he was very good, you know. But back then, the black musicians, there was quite a bit of prejudice. They didn't play, you didn't see them in the mainstream white clubs. They all played on clubs on the north side of Minneapolis, kind of like in Chicago, they got the South Side blues, you know, it was the north side. And, but after that first album, I don't think it was a huge success, but we all knew that he was very talented and probably would go somewhere. So every guitar player in town just about wanted to try out, you know, for this thing that looked like it really was going to go somewhere, because he was on a major label, Warner Brothers. And it looked like, you know, he had a career, so everybody tried out, you know.
So was that a word of mouth thing, or was it being publicized in, you know, sort of the music journals?
Well, it was kind of word of mouth, although I knew the drummer, Bobby Z. I knew him a little bit. And yeah, they held it at a rehearsal place that was an abandoned tire warehouse, really crummy, beat up old place, cinder block building, you know. And I went in, and there was a, Prince had put a big picture of Jimi Hendrix, a poster on the wall, and there were rugs on the floor, and, you know, and at that time it was Bobby Z, the drummer, and Andre Simone, the first bass player. And that was it. Nobody else yet. And Prince, of course. And
so what
he
did
came
you?
in. What's that? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, how did the audition go? What sort of tunes would you play?
Well, we just jammed, mostly one chord jams. You know, Prince played the Oberheim synthesizer for a while. Then he played drums, and he was a much more funky drummer, you know, than Bobby Z. And, you know, it kind of went on for a while. He didn't talk to me at all, hardly at all. He did point at my guitar at some point and asked me what it was, because I had an Epiphone coronet that I made a new pickguard for, so it looked different. And then he got up and walked out, and Bobby Z said, "Boy, Dave, it looks good, but I got to tell you that he is looking for a black female guitar player." And at that time, I was neither of those. So, and then, you know, he did, you know, so it, you know, that was the end of that. And yeah, the jams they're very competent, but yeah, there were no tunes, you know, we just jammed over a funky E9 chord until it was kind of ground into the ground and did something else, you know. And but it was, at least I can say I did it, you know.
You mentioned that you knew Bobby Rivkin, Bobby Z. Was that because you know, he would come into the store with Prince and Owen, and they would jam, or did you go back on a personal level?
I can't remember how that went. There was kind of a clan of different people that hung out together. One was, you ever heard that song Funky Town?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was a disco hit. Yeah, the guy that produced that and wrote the song, he was friends of him. And Dr. Matt Fink was part of that group, and I knew him from club band. So there was this group of people. A lot of them were Jewish, and they were all very clever people that hung out. And I think I mostly knew Matt, although he wasn't in the band yet, you know. And I think that's how I got introduced to Bobby. Bobby's brother, David Z, produced Prince's demos that were done in a studio, you know, so there was that connection.
Yeah.
I'd played on commercials at that studio too, so.
Okay.
Yes. So you mentioned when he'd come into the shop, and obviously he'd play a guitar on one hand and a keyboard on the other. But I would imagine he had Andre Simone with him, or some of his other guys. How did he stand
It was
out?
Andre. How's that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did he stand out, or was Andre equally as talented at that time?
Well, what stood out about Prince, number one, is he was real good on guitar, but he could play all the other instruments, and I saw him do that. I saw him do it at the Jam. I saw him play synthesizer at the store. Didn't hear him sing it all at that time. He didn't sing at the Jam or anything else, but he was very exciting, and he had kind of a mysterious thing about him. I've seen there's some Prince impersonators, but there's something about Prince. He was so exotic and kind of mysterious that none of them, the rest of them just seemed like regular guys, and he had that already, he didn't, he didn't say much. He had no small talk, but he could express whatever he had to. Once I saw him rehearsing the band, and you would have thought a theater director had taken over his body. He was saying, "Now, Wendy, I know you can do this part. You just try it again." I thought, my God, he can do whatever it takes to get the goal done, but he's just not a small talker. If there's nothing that isn't useful, he just wouldn't talk at all.
I'm going to deliberately come back to that because
Okay.
I'm just conscious of jumping around the timeline, and I kind of just want to nail down with you when you did that audition. So I believe it was Dell's Tire Mart. Is that the name of the location?
Yeah.
Over in Seven Corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drove around. I drove around that area.
Yeah, I think there's a hotel sitting there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Big
I think
Hilton.
there's a hotel there sitting there, Holiday Inn or something. Yeah, that was probably about 1979, I would guess. Would that be about it?
I think probably late 78, somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Because I got to be a pretty good guitar player, so I took myself seriously in that role too, and thought I thought I got to try this, let's see what happens,
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously you would have seen Bobby and Gail Chapman and these other people get recruited, or probably heard it through the grapevine. Did you follow Prince's career much after that?
Yeah, well, and I knew Des Dickerson a little bit. He was in a local band, and he could do a fantastic Jimi Hendrix tribute. So I can just see him do it now. He wore a suit, and he was a top player in town, So I remember when he got the job, I thought, well, yeah, that'll do the trick. I followed him. I went to different things. I think it was 85. He had one of his birthday parties. He did a concert at First Avenue. I had tickets to that, one right up front. He had one of his birthdays at a big ballroom called the Prom Ballroom. It was like one of those ballrooms like from the 30s, And with his own money, he had the ceiling painted purple, and they just left it after that. And he had jugglers and some movie stars were there. It was a big deal, He knew how to have how to make things special, make it interesting,
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little period of maybe 4 or 5 years before, he comes into Newt Coupe and asks for the cloud guitar, the infamous cloud guitar. But in that period, how much of maybe his career or people who were in his bands, were people coming in asking for repairs and work done on instruments at that point?
Yeah, you mean people from his band and such?
Well, just people from that circle. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I worked on Prince's L5 before that. I worked on the bass that we used as the model for the guitar with the horn,
Yeah, sardonic.
Worked later on. I did stuff for Jesse Johnson. It's either Jimmy Jam or Terry Lewis, the one that played bass. I did his stuff.
Terry.
I
Yeah.
also, Mark Brown, I did a bass for him. We had a woman that could do rose mauling, that Swedish folk art, with flowers that they often do on
Okay.
like cabinets and stuff. That, and then I made a guitar for Wendy that's in a photo that I have. She wanted a clear plexiglass guitar with flowers inside the plexiglass embedded in
Right.
it, with a Rickenbacker neck.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which that was so difficult to do, and then it was ultimately too heavy for her.
What era was that? Is that while she was in the band with Prince?
That would be 84 when we did that.
Okay.
Yeah, summer of 84.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had an idea that was intriguing, but they were all so busy you could never talk to anybody, Prince or
Yeah.
her, to iron out things. Like, will it be too heavy? She had a concept, and I did what she wanted, and it was,
Yeah.
it was heavy. But
Uh,
yeah, I did. Who else? There was a couple other bands. When you have a scene in an area, like say Liverpool, there weren't
Mhm.
just the Beatles, there were hundreds of bands of varying
Yeah.
levels of success. And in Minneapolis, it was kind of like that too. Then everybody, they all dressed kind of like Prince did, in the fancy outfits. There was a female band, and then there was there was a whole bunch of them. Prince really single-handedly took Minneapolis. There was this flyover land where you could never make it, and turned it into the center of everything. The television crews would come and film me making stuff, and people had been out. They'd come down, and I remember some woman from France came down and wanted to meet me, and was so excited because she thought she saw the dumpster where they threw the girl in the movie.
Yeah.
So every day was fun. Every day, we the store owner, he had 1,000 tambourines painted purple, and it was just every day was exciting.
Yeah.
Dave, we have a really good Patreon group. Patreon is usually supporters of a YouTube channel. Um, we have one member. His name is U.S. Agent, and he asked the question. I think you've pretty much answered it, but he just said, "Did Dave make guitars for Andre Simone, Jesse Johnson, or any other guitar player in the Purple camp?" I think for the most part you touched on that with what you just told us.
Yeah, there was another repairman while I was gone in London, and then I resumed when I came back, and I think he made Jesse's guitar, but I worked on them all. I remember Jesse was, we painted one of them pink, but he thought it was a little too purple, and he was worried. He said, "This looks a little too much like purple. Prince is not going to like that." I remember that. And yeah, there was some other, there was a lot of, God, I can't think of the names of all the bands, but there was a whole bunch of bands that came up. One of them was in the Purple Rain movie for about 5 seconds. I can't think of their name, but yeah, we made guitars,
Yeah.
sometimes using parts, like Warmoth parts, except the Warmoth, there was a different company. Boogie Bodies was the one that we got the stuff from, modified them and used them a lot too, didn't make everything from scratch.
So you mentioned London
Boy,
then.
everything. Yeah.
So tell us about how that came about, that sort of detour that you did and your time in London.
Well, that was, I first went over in 81. So, I quit the New Capet for a bit, went over there, and I love Europe. And the store owner had a friend, there was a guy named Doug Chandler, and he had Chandler guitars. They were by Kew Gardens in Richmond.
Richmond Way. Yeah.
And they were a major store later on. They introduced Soldano amps. They introduced PRS. They were distributors too. And he arranged for me to go over and be the guitar repairman at Chandler's. And boy, I was, to me, that was a big deal. I go into some place where I'm going to live for a while, work for people I never met, not knowing if they're going to be nice. you know, and but I did it, and they were nice, and you know, and I was there altogether about a year, and it was fun. I loved it, you know. It was
Yeah.
the early '80s. It was kind of an interesting time because you still had bands from the '60s where the guys weren't even quite 40 years old, and then you had the punk scene, whatever, with the Mohawks.
Yeah.
And then you had kind of the waning days of the original success of like ELP and Yes and all that. And it was all kind of happening at the same time, you know. But all these people, they were kind of kept to themselves. I remember once I went to some pub and the guy said, "Well, you know, you're welcome here, but this is really not your kind of place." You know, I remember thinking, I looked around and I went, "Yeah, I guess that's true." But
And
it was
we are
a
a funny
very
little
you
island.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a scene. I liked the store. It was, although they had very few tools. I remember I got there and I thought there'd be a nice shop, and I said, "Well, get out. Can I see your tools?" And I got a big plastic bin out, and I said, "It's time for us to go to the tool store." So we went to Kingston, and I didn't know what a spanner was. You know, I thought, "What the hell is that?" And so it was tough, you know, at first. You know, but it was I'm glad I did it. You know, it was an adventure.
Yeah.
Um,
And was that when you made the pilgrimage to Liverpool during that year?
Yeah, yeah, and the owner's brother worked there, younger brother Charlie Chandler. He still has a store in it's what is that? It's called Charlie Chandler's Guitar Experience. He's still doing that.
Okay.
It's over across the bridge from Kingston. It's in Hampton Wick.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's still there. I talked to him, you know, and Chandler Guitars is no more, but he's still doing it.
Yeah.
so
And
Dave, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just going to ask, in that year that you were there, I mean, I've seen you reference a few people on your work shed. Is that where you meet people like Randy Rhoads during that era?
Beat me to it.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's funny. It was a little shop, you know, but everybody came to all the biggest stars: Greg Lake, Randy Rhoads. I don't know if you know who Jeff Whitehorn is. He played with all kinds of people. Snowy White from Thin Lizzy did stuff for Scott Gorham, and what was the main guy that sang in Thin Lizzy did work for him. Met Dick Taylor from the Pretty Things, who had started the Rolling Stones and then quit to go back to school. Probably the only time that wasn't a good idea. And every day I got to know Mitch Mitchell, the Hendrix drummer,
Wow.
because he had some guitars. He brought them in. You know, I got to know him. And
What was
yeah,
your
Randy was with.
yeah.
I was gonna say he was with Ozzy, and I didn't follow that. My favorite. I'll just regress for 1 second. My favorite guy of all those as a player was Gary Moore. I was a big fan of his playing, and he came in a lot. Yeah, I put his first Floyd Rose on. I worked on the Peter Green Les Paul. I went to his shows. You know, we kind of became friends. You know, and
Wow.
but yeah, one day Randy came in, and we kind of knew who he was, but we heard he was good. And he brought in the polka dot V and the first white Rhodes, you know. And I remember it was funny. One of them, it was kind of odd because you think of a metal guitar having a thin neck and big frets, but one of them had a thick neck and little frets. I think it was the V, you know. And so I did some stuff to them, and he was very quiet, serious. He seemed like a guy that didn't seem like a rock star. He seemed like a player that had an opportunity for a big gig, which I think is what he was, you know.
Yeah.
And did stuff for him. Yeah, I think he was in a couple times, you know. I remember he seemed to be happy with how it went. there wasn't a lot of good guitar repair that I could see in London, because on my days off, I go down to Denmark Street, look
Yeah.
around. And there was Andy's Guitars. That was the only big shop I could find on Denmark Street. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm familiar with
you know,
Denmark Street, but obviously not being a guitarist, I don't know where the horns are. I play a little piano, and I know the piano places down that way.
okay.
Did you get to jam with those guys? Like Gary Moore, would he, plug in? Did you get to have a little play along with him?
Well, he actually at one point said, I'm going to invite you over to a jam someday. But the thought of that, it was kind of like Muhammad Ali said, I'd like to have boxing with you. The whole idea kind of made me nervous. He would come into the store, and it was a small store, and there was a Marshall stack. He would turn it all the way up and play. But it wasn't just loud. He was a moody guy. He had some bad times. His face was all cut up, from a terrible incident, and he was troubled, and all that seemed to come out when he played. It wasn't just loud, or he didn't use an awful lot of overdrive compared to some guys. It was just menacing. When you were around him playing like that, it was like you were like the scene of an accident or something. I don't know how to put it. It was something there that had a real an edge to it that a lot of other players didn't have. Come out when he played.
Yeah.
It was. I can just see him now and thinking, whoa, this guy's intense.
Yeah. But I think what we know now, it's quite apt, isn't it, that you've picked up on that. Can I ask you about Randy a little bit more? Because obviously he was just a kid,
Sure.
I mean, he was always young, right up. So, I mean, I think he'd been given lessons, hadn't he? He'd been teaching people. So he was a very, very classically trained.
His mom had a music school.
Yeah.
And he taught there.
So.
Yeah, his mom had a school. Yeah, I have a friend that got to know her, actually. I have a friend that's a Randy Rhodes nut. He's gone to where the bus incident happened. He's visited. He got to know Randy's brother and his mother and all that. Yeah, we didn't interact a lot. I remember he was very small, kind of Angus Young size, and he seemed very serious, and was very intent on just having his guitars fixed. I guess you could kind of say he was a little bit like Prince in that there wasn't a lot of small talk and just kind of schmaltzing around. It was, I need this done, and he wasn't rude or anything, but it was like, I got to have this done, and that was kind of the end of it. Some people like Greg Lake, he was a big, jolly, kind of goofy, fun guy. He was different. I remember I thought before he came in that maybe he would be a little pretentious, I don't know why I thought that, maybe because, their music was, kind of art rock or progressive. And he was just like a big, fun guy that you'd meet in the bar. I remember he had a big Rolex on, and he was all excited. He was going to get a Kahler bass tremolo on, and he was kind of pantomiming how he was going to use it and all that. And then he played some nice acoustic stuff. He had nice voicings when he played acoustic guitar, and he played some of that for me, and so I really enjoyed working with him.
So I just want to ask a question, Dave. Maybe you can relate to this as a guitar player and musician, you play in bands. Before we get going, I know what's coming next for our big topic, but I had a point, and I just wondering if you experienced this, like playing in bands, the grind of playing on weekends or whatever, the late nights. For me personally, I get up early to run a music store. I give guitar lessons every other night of the week. I got to a point I didn't like the traveling. I didn't like a lot of the BS and the politics that goes on within bands. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So I just got to a point for me, I'm like, hey, I like teaching guitar. I'm good at it. I got a lot of students. Why leave the house? Did you kind of have a moment like that where you thought, why am I doing this when I can just do guitar repairs and just have my own little piece,
Well, when in my 20s, in the 70s and early 80s, it wasn't so much like that. I never had to leave town to play. Did the same club once for a year and a half. played songs with 3 other guys. We were about as tight as the Beatles were. We got to play Steely Dan and Eagles. There was no ABBA or Proud Mary in there. It was just fantastic. But then later on, I did jobbing gigs and stuff, the things you have to do to keep playing as a musician playing little crappy bars in the middle of nowhere, or doing all kinds of weddings and stuff, playing stuff you would never really want to play. That's when I thought, this is no fun anymore.
Yeah. So
it came for me later.
Okay. So that point did happen to you as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what happens to a lot of us. So.
Oh yeah, later on it happened big time. I had some terrible gigs with drunken players and petty infighting, adults acting like spoiled little kids, and having stupid conversations with drunken people, and you name it.
Yeah.
But for a while it was great.
Yeah. I often
When
say
you're a young guy, you get to. You get to hang out with your friends. You don't have to wonder what you're going to do with your weekend. You're going to be kind of the star of the show. You meet. It's easy to meet ladies. It was fantastic for a while.
I think we all have thousands of those like stories of just the craziness and all the different things you experience. And I mean, this YouTube channel is still young. I got thousands of stories that'll come out sooner or later.
I was just going to ask, what sort of brought your time in London to an end, and then you returned to Minneapolis?
Well, I came. They wanted me to stay and be full time and come back and live there permanently. And I got back to Minneapolis, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll pack up my stuff. But I got back here, and I thought, oh, England was great, but this is really my home. I don't think I can do this. Saw my family and all my friends again, and then it's funny how everything works out. With Prince. If I had stayed there, I wouldn't have been able to make the guitar. From what I heard, he had a different guy that was going to make it, and then they had a falling out, so that made him look for somebody else.
Who was that?
It all came together. What's that?
Who was the other guy?
The guy's name was Chuck Orr. He made guitars for Prince early on. In fact, Prince thanked him on the back of the first album.
Yeah.
And a lot of Prince fans you can see one of his Chuck Orr guitars that Prince played, but I guess they had a falling out. In fact, when I made the guitar, I had to do it really quick, but because of this falling out, which I think is true, I think that story is true. The movie had already been started.
Yeah,
I
wanted to ask you. I did want to ask, because I think the production dates for Purple Rain were the 1st of November to about the 15th or 16th of December, and then it was all the First Avenue shots. So when did they come to you? Did he come? Did he come to you directly, knowing you?
No, he came to the store. When I got back from London, I thought, well, I'm going to go back. They had let me take my job back there, and I walked in, and it seemed to me I was only back a few days. I think it was the end of October. And one day I walked in, and I saw Prince up at the counter talking to one of the owners, and then they went into the back office. And then I went downstairs and got to work. And then the owner come down and said, the Prince has a project. He wants a guitar made. Prince is going to make a movie. And I remember thinking, he's going to do what? Usually you were further into your career. I mean, his career, it was going pretty well. But like Elvis and all that, they waited usually till they were a real pretty big star. Yeah. But Prince had the drive and the resolve to do it at that point. And then I'd never made a guitar. I'd only fixed them. And I thought, well, what am I going to do about this? And I thought, well, if I say no, I'll regret it forever, maybe. And so I'm going to try. If I fail, they won't kill me. They'll have to go out and get a white Stratocaster instead. But I thought, it's amazing what you can do. A lot of times if you're put on the spot, if life throws you opportunities that you
Oh,
maybe aren't
absolutely.
quite prepared for, but you got probably can at least you could try to pull off. It's often amazing what you can do, like so they just had me do that all the time. There was another guy there that painted the first ones, but they had him do all the repairs and I did all the woodwork, and I did it every 6 days a week, I think, for a month. I
So,
think the whole thing was about a month, as I remember it.
yeah, I appreciate I'm also
Maybe
taking
a
you
month
back
and a
like
half.
40 years, so I'm going to ask you very specific questions. Don't worry if, the memory isn't right there. When he
I
came
didn't do
in,
a lot of drugs or drinking. I got a pretty good memory.
great. So is it Jeff Hill who was the owner of
Yeah.
Newt?
Well, there
So,
were two of them.
okay. Was it
And
Jeff
Jeff
that Prince
Hill,
spoke
he
to
was,
that day?
yeah. Yeah, he was more of the rock and roll guy that enjoyed playing and hanging out. And the other owner was really more of a businessman. He wasn't as involved in hanging out with musicians and all that. Yeah, Prince and
Yeah.
him and Jeff, they seem to get along real well. Yeah, he's the one. He's not with
Okay.
us anymore.
Right. And do you think when Prince was asking about this guitar being made, Jeff said yes, because why would you ever say no? You'd at least give it a go. Did Prince know that you would be the person who was going to be tasked with making that guitar?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, he knew later that I did it because in the Guitar Player magazine in 2000, they asked him who made his guitar, and he mentioned me. He saw me around, after I made it, and the movie was a success. Prince, he rented out all the major venues in town, three of them, for each of them for a whole week. It must have cost him a fortune, and he would use them as practice facilities. And I went to all the rehearsals and I would see him. And so I was around a lot,
Yeah.
but at that time, I'm not so sure if since he talked so little, a lot of times he didn't know what he knew, because he didn't say a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. But did he recognize you from obviously the audition and, the times that you'd interacted with him in the shop?
He never acknowledged that, no.
Yeah. So I am curious. Is it what, 3-4 weeks that you had to get that guitar put together for him?
Well, it was at least a month because they had to be painted too, and
Okay.
on that one we used nitrocellulose lacquer, which, it don't cure fully right away. I mean, it looks dry to the touch, but it isn't, and I would say it was 4 to 5 weeks, somewhere in there,
Okay.
I remember they allowed me to bring it home and show my parents around Christmas, so I would say it was a month and a half,
Is that before you handed it over for filming?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I mean this honestly with the greatest of respect. Was that a proper job of creating a guitar that you created something that was meant to be played, or were you creating a prop for a movie and maybe it wasn't designed to play that great?
Well, I made it play as good. It played good. My skills weren't as good as they are now, and I was rushed. But yeah, it played, and it wasn't just a prop. I thought of it mostly that is its main purpose. It was a movie kind of a prop, but I made it play as good as I could. And it did a decent fret work, set it up. I made it play as good as I could.
Yeah, like that's.
But it really it served a purpose in the movie as part of the storyline and all that. So.
And in terms of what they asked, he gave you the sardonic space and said, I need you to base it off of this design wise. Am I recollecting that right?
Yeah, all the requests were given to Jeff Hill, and he told me, he said, It's going to have this general shape. It's going to be white. He wants it white. He wants gold hardware. And he specified EMG pickups. He already knew that he liked them for some reason.
Yeah.
And he wanted spades on the fingerboard. People think those are dots, but they're little spades. And that was it. And normally you make a custom guitar, you want to ask the guy, well, how big should the neck be? Well, how big should the frets be? And there was no way. I try and get a hold of the guitar tech, and he'd say, "Well, I'll ask Prince," but he never got back. So I thought, well, I'll make it so I like it. That's all I can do, you know.
I
And it
think
turned out that our tastes were similar.
for 1 month and that's your first guitar, that's blows my mind. Like, were you
Yeah.
feeling a lot of pressure as the days were clicking in doing that?
I remember feeling mostly exhilarated. You know, I was working so hard and so zoned in on what I was doing. It seemed exciting and exhilarating. No, I don't think I felt a whole lot of pressure. I just was happy to be doing it, you know.
Yeah.
A question that's just come to me: if he did have a falling out with Chuck Orr, which sounds more than possible, and then you guys get quite a late request to create the guitar, were there any other shops that you might have gone to ask them to put a guitar together, just so that all of his eggs perhaps weren't in one basket?
Yeah, there was a store called Hoffman Guitars. They were going by that time. They could have done it.
Have you ever heard
that's
anything?
Probably about it. Sorry.
Have you ever heard anything through the grapevine that anybody else was approached as a backup? Or
No. Prince had been. That was a store he liked to come to, you know, to jam and to, you know, buy stuff. And I worked on his L5S, you know, so that was kind of his place to go to, you know. So I think he just thought, well, I'll go to New Capay. I know them, and that's what we'll do, you know.
Yeah.
Dave,
well, you knocked it out the park. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, my God. Dave, I wanted to ask you on the topic of the EMG pickups. So, with this channel, as I started doing, you know, learning about Prince, doing some reaction videos, talking with people about it, and I started realizing, I'm like, he's using EMG pickups, the single coil and the neck and the humbucker and the bridge. And I, you know, being a hard rock guy is my background, I thought that was a little interesting that those were his choice of pickups. At that time, were EMG recognized as more as of a metal hard rock brand of pickups? Was it a little odd? Were you kind of going, EMG pickups? Oh, okay.
No, they didn't get that reputation with like people with Zach Wilde using them and all that. That kind of developed much later.
Gotcha.
They were just another brand. I mean, they were set apart by the fact that they were active. You know, and they're very clean and very quiet. They didn't seem to pay as much attention to what they were in as some other brands of guitars, pickups were. You know what I mean? They seemed to not. They weren't like a vintage pickup. They were very different than that. But they They would cut through. And they were so quiet, you know, and I guess that's probably what he liked. They do the funky rhythm pretty well, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'll just go over quickly to another Patreon question. It's from Wanda Manning. She's part of our great Patreon community. So she asked the question, I think we've covered it, but just to clarify again, who came up with the idea for the cloud guitar? It was already presented because there was a bass made previously in that shape, was it not?
Yeah, by a guy named his last name is Levin. He was a repairman at a store in New York City. I can't quite.
I know
think
there's
of
a
the name
Matthew
of the
somewhere
store.
in that name, isn't it? Was that Matthew something the store, or was it Matthew Levin?
No, I can't quite think of the name of the store. It'll come to me in a second. But he was a repairman there, and the story I heard, Andrew Simone seems to think that he got it in L.A., but I'm pretty darn sure that isn't true. Because when I had worked on that bass a few times before, I left to England even, and I was told that Prince bought it in New York City, and that all makes sense because that's where the store was, and that's where the repairman was. And I've had emails with him. It looks as though he made it for himself and then decided it wasn't really his kind of thing and put it up for consignment in the store. And Prince went to New York City before he became famous. The way I heard it was that he was trying to see if he could kind of scare up a recording contract on his own, you know, and it didn't happen, but he bought that bass.
So are
I
you
can't
familiar
think of the
with
name of the
Andrea?
store right now.
I'm sure you're familiar with Andrea Swenson, formerly of the
Oh
current.
yeah, she's been to my shop. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. She
So
did a
Andrea,
story about.
she did. Yeah, she
Yeah.
seems to think that the bass somehow makes its way from New York to Oakland near the record plant where Prince did his first album, and that's perhaps where he bought it, and that sort of confirms Andre's memory. But nobody can really
I guess
then say
I
how
can't
does the
say.
bass go. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can't. You know, I wasn't there. I don't have a good opinion on that really.
Yeah, no, it's
But
one of those
I did.
Prince myths, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. The guy's name was Levin. I can't think of the store. It's still there, but I can't quite. The name is eluding me. It's still in the Manhattan area.
Yeah. So can you speak to? Obviously, you've been given this sort of quite basic spec from Prince. You know, has to be a EMG gold, based on the sardonyx bass. Is it a standard size guitar? Because obviously he's quite a diminutive guy, and that guitar doesn't look large on it. So in terms of sizing, where does it fit compared to
Well,
other?
it has. Excuse me. It has the scale length, the neck length of a Gibson, shorter than a Fender. It's a 24 3/4. And yeah, I sized it down a little bit. You know, the body is pretty similar. The cutaway is in a little different place. You know, all the location of the parts is totally different on the top. You know, but it's not real big. No, in fact, I had to use very small knobs on it. I used the smaller of the two knobs that they put on a Fender Jazz bass because it was just very crowded in the area where you could put stuff. There's not a lot of body to it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you did then that you wish you hadn't because you've had to recreate them over, 30, 40 years?
No, I think it works pretty well for what it is, you know, and what I had to do where the access panels, the routes on the back are where they should be. No, the biggest problem with reproducing them I remember when, I would make one off and on over the years, but then after Prince died, there was a tremendous demand. I had the phone ring the next day, ring, I think 23 times, you know. And I thought, well, I gotta ramp this up a little bit. I got demand. And I thought, boy, after almost 40 years, can I get the stuff anymore? Because people demanded that they be just exactly the same. Otherwise you could get a copy somewhere. And they still made the maple trees. I had that under control. But the bridges, they hadn't made them for years. First I had to find all the new old stock ones left at distributors. Then now I have people in Tokyo and different European cities where they go to stores looking for ones that were never sold. I had a guy in Ireland find some, a guy in Tokyo. The EMG pickups, they changed their logo. So I got them to make a special run to get out the old stamper, The tuners changed. And that was my biggest luck. I went on Reverb and there was a guy, he said, 20 boxes of Scheller tuners stored for 20 years, brand new. I bought them all. They were $5,000, about every damn one of them.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So all that stuff, so I could still make them just exactly like it was,
Yeah.
So, but it's been a lot of trouble. And now with the supply chain crisis, different things, they can't get the Baltic birch from Russia. It's if all I had to do is make the guitar, about half my work would be gone, but I have to deal with all the stuff, cases and the paint and all the materials, you know.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of all Prince fans that if there's anyone that you need in any of the countries worldwide, reach out, just put the word out. If you need us to walk, into a shop
Oh,
and video call
Yeah,
you and
absolutely.
see if it's the right part, we'll help. Absolutely.
yeah. It's the Schaller 457 bridge is what it is. It's gold. The 455 was chrome, and I can't have them replated, you know, but I got a fairly good supply. I spent a lot of time just, getting as many as I could because I want to plan ahead. I'd like to do this for a while yet, you know. I went to all that trouble to defend my trademark, and now I'd like to keep making them, you know.
On
Absolutely.
that note, Dave, if I may ask, for those of us in the guitar nose circles, if I was to ever purchase a cloud guitar, I would want to make sure it's one of the ones that you made. Um, every company has problems with knockoffs around the world. For people that might not be quite as much in the guitar no circle, what would be some simple things that they could look for to say, no, this Dave made this one, as opposed to some of the stuff that's out there?
Well, yeah, I don't think many of mine are out in the public, but the first thing would be that horn on that pointy part of the headstock, that horn.
Yep.
On most of the copies, it's shorter. In fact, I read that Prince, when he had the Schecter ones made, he did that ahead specifically so he could see that they weren't like the originals. So that's the first thing. Number two is on mine, and I am going to do a Facebook post on this at some point. The neck pickup was mounted from behind, so you don't see the tabs, the mounting tabs on the EMG SA. It was done from behind, and you just see a hole that they come through with the two screws. Most of the other ones do it from the front,
Okay.
which is a lot easier to do. And number three would be the volume control. On most of the other ones, its position is right across from the center of the humbucking pickup ring. On mine, it's below that a bit. It's off center.
Okay.
And that would be the main things, you know.
So everybody
From a
out there,
distance that either the yeah, I have people all the time send me photos and
yeah.
There was a guy, Andy Beach. Did you ever hear of Andy Beach? He's a
I think
guitar
I've heard the
builder
name.
on the
Yeah.
yeah, he's in I think the Pacific Northwest. He made a lot of Prince had him make a whole bunch of them later.
Yeah.
Okay.
After he kind of worn out the ones that I did, and his are quite accurate. But almost all the other ones, and you get kind of you can kind of see the work of your own hand, you know, especially in the carving. You know, I have some photos of the originals, and I look at them once in a while, and to make sure that I'm still doing it the same way. You know, I go to a lot of trouble to make sure that they don't start to veer off from the way they should be, but it just seems like that's how I still want to do it. You know, it's not that hard. Just my eye for a curve and the way things should look. That's kind of how I do it, you know, and so it's not that hard to maintain that, you know. I made a fourth one. Here's something very few people know.
Okay.
I made 3 for Prince, the original, and then 2 more for touring. And then Warner Brothers had me make one that they gave away in a contest in the UK in, I think, 84 or 85. And the owner of that one sent me a whole bunch of photos. He still has it. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is, though. And they were very detailed. And I looked at them and I thought, geez, that's I still got it the same, you know. But so I go to a lot of trouble to make it because I want to make it, number one, as accurate as can be, and number two, play good and have really good detail, as though it was like a PRS or something, you know, of that quality.
Are you working on?
I work hard at that.
Are you working on any of them at the moment for clients?
Oh yeah, I have several in production. Yeah, I've gotten behind. I spent so much time with my lawyers defending my case. You know, so many hours researching documents and getting people to sign statements. that I'm quite behind on them, you know. So yeah, I got lots of orders. I work on them every day, you know.
Um,
And
Well, I think
you know,
we have a mutual friend, Ellie, who's one of Brian's patrons.
mhm.
And I think he'd
Ellie.
like to join the queue at some point if you could offer him a nice discount.
oh,
But once you've cleared your
well, yeah,
backlog,
we could put something on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the build time is around 10 to 12 months, you know, because
Mm.
they're all done you know, to order. You know, I don't make. Someday I'd like to make one to hang up in my showroom, you know, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
how many can you do
They're very
concurrently?
sorry.
Can you do
Well, I
several
could probably
concurrently?
about one a month at the most, maybe 5 to 6 weeks somewhere in there. They're very labor intensive. I mean,
Mm.
geez, I bet I could make 10 Telecasters by the time I make one of those things. They got all kinds of bevels, they got curves,
Yeah.
they have that carved area. I do that with little hand chisels, you know, and you know, and I wanted to do it. I had a guy tell me that you could take a CNC machine, you know, if you know what those are, computer controlled routers. He said, Dave,
Okay.
I could carve the whole thing for you, and all you have to do is put it together. And I said, no, I'd rather suffer and not be a liar and be able to say that I carved the damn thing, you know.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
it's it's hard work, you know. You got all kinds of noisy tools on. You got earplugs in and goggles on. It's not, you know, it's kind of hard work at times, but it's rewarding, you know.
Yeah. So
Dave, I want to ask for Prince fans. I want to take this opportunity and ask. One of the things that amazed me as I learned more and more about him is all the instruments that he could play, as you had referred to earlier. I have to ask, and I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm around the store when he would come in. Did you ever witness him playing an instrument that might surprise people, like the glockenspiel or the theremin or something? Did you ever see some where it's just like, wow, I saw Prince play that, you know?
Unfortunately, the store wasn't that well equipped with stuff to buy. It was mostly guitars and some keyboards and a little bit of drums.
Mm.
But you know, he was a hard worker. He could practice all day with a band and then go home and play drums by himself till the sun come up. That's all he wanted to do.
Yeah.
His roadie, he said, when they would tour Europe and stuff, Prince would kind of make fun of the other ones for wanting to go out and see the sights. He would just stay in his hotel room and want to write tunes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
He just wanted. He said he could lay out several guitars at Paisley Park in the early evening, and Prince would record all night. He'd come back the next day, and there'd be like 3 finished songs where he played all the parts on them. You know,
Wow.
they
yeah,
could hardly find an engineer that could stand up to his stamina. You know, and he would just keep going. You know, so he had the
yeah.
tremendous talent and the tremendous work ethic. You know, he had both. You know.
Do you think
Yeah.
we'll ever see anyone like him again?
No, you know, what really stands apart is that there were no missing pieces. In other words, he could play all the instruments, he could sing, he could write the songs, he could arrange them, he could produce himself, he could create a look, he could create a controversy about himself, he could co-create costumes, and mostly he could run and be his own manager. He could dance. I mean, nobody can do all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's nobody else that has no missing parts.
Hmm.
You know, there's people that love him for his music. There's other people that just love him as like a style icon, you know, for how he looked in his clothes. You know,
Yeah.
he appeals to all kinds of people at once. To get all that in one more other person, I can't think of anybody that, I don't know if you guys can. I can't think of anybody else that that has all those pieces in place.
You know,
No, I think talent-wise, there are people who can touch aspects of it, but I think you put it brilliantly there. You know, there's no missing jigsaw puzzle, you know, piece. I think that you can't say about anybody else.
you know,
Yeah,
I spent time trying to think about that. Like, who else could compare to Prince? And you know, the only person that in my head I could come up with was a fellow by the name of. It's not. It's still. It's not. He can't do all of what Prince did, but there's a fellow in a band, Canadian famous band called Triumph named Rick Emmett. He could really sing, and he was a virtuoso guitar player. Don't think he
Oh
couldn't do
yeah.
all the other stuff Prince could do, but he's the only other person that kind of comes to mind. Maybe like I'm sure there's others, but I don't think anyone will be able to be the package that Prince was.
Well, yeah, he was such an entertainer too. I mean, there's videos where he's dancing and just being a cool. You know, he was small, but he was so well proportioned. He just looked cool. You know, and then he had a sense of mystery about him. He wasn't just a
Yeah.
regular guy. He had almost like David Bowie, where he's just his personality and his persona is very powerful, independent of what he does with it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of. I suppose you could say Paul McCartney does some of that. He can write and sing and play instruments, but he don't dance. And he's kind of a regular bloke in some ways. You know, Prince was. It was something mysterious about him and kind of exotic. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
There was something there that, like when I see the impersonators, there's a guy in town who's real good at it, but nobody has that mysterious charm about him. You know, it was a special thing. You know.
Yeah. Do you remember that point in time where it was kind of like, as you can see as time went on, Prince carried a lot of weight with him. Where, like, do you remember the what I'm trying to say is, do you remember the point in time where he'd come into the store and you're like, oh, he's just this kid in town and he plays, to the point where it's like, it's him. That's the man. You know. Do you remember that kind of time frame when that kind of shift happened?
Well, you know, I was only at the store till '85, but
Yeah.
as he got bigger, he appeared less. He didn't come in much anymore. You know, the crew would come in. You know, and I've done stuff, work for him. You know, almost right up to the end. I worked on those Vox guitars that he had at the end. Him and Donna had. I worked on. About 15 years ago, I repaired the yellow Hohner Telly. You know, it had damage.
Yeah.
But you know, it would be the staff would come out. You know, and so I can't say that I ever saw him much after I left. You know,
So I'm just
yeah.
going to ditch my timeline concept because you've just said a couple of things there that I think are super important. So the Vox guitar that sort of appeared towards the end, the hollow body.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of take on that? Like, why would he move to a hollow body?
Yeah.
Well, I remember what I did to it. It had a broken neck. I fixed it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, if you don't have something around for a while, you mostly just think about the problem. I remember thinking it was a quality guitar. You know, I'm not sure. You know, he liked the guitars to perform, but he also thought of the guitars as how is it going to look on stage or in a
Absolutely.
video. You know, he wouldn't be a guy that like a guitar nerd where he'd sit around and clean them and stuff, you know, and he just wanted him to use, he had this white bass. What was it? A Warwick, I think. They had some purple paint on it. They one day he said, from what I heard, he said, I want some purple on there. And they took it out and started spraying it outside the staff, just the amateurs. And before it was dry, he said, I want to use it right now. I need that bass. And so it was smelly and he just took it in and played it. They were all tools either for music or for the look.
Yeah.
You know, he was very into color. You know, he would have outfits that were custom dyed. I know the lady that dyed all the cloth for his stuff, you know, and everything would match. And, you know, he saw the big picture as an entertainer and a musician. He saw the ultimate goal, and everything fit into serving that. And the guitars were part of that, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a multimedia extravaganza, wasn't it? It wasn't just a guy who's going to play guitar and sing. It was, how is it going to look? What's the color scheme? What if I wear something, which guitar matches with it? The Vox hollow
like
body.
in that cream, dude, I gotta say that cream video, you know, where that's a good example of that with the yellow one and how everything else looks in the video and the girls dancing and the whole thing,
exactly.
you know. Yeah.
So to someone who doesn't
play
guitar, that Vox hollow body, Is it a much lighter guitar, as the name would suggest?
I don't remember that too much. I remember it was well made, and I remember what I had to do to it. I
Okay.
remember Donna had one too.
Yeah.
It was
I
a real attempt to make a pro level guitar, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from what I've heard that they're quite hard to get hold of now, and if any of them pop up on Reverb or any of these sites, they're quickly snapped up by Prince aficionados. But I kind of was asking from the point of view that obviously towards the end, I would say now, looking back in hindsight, that maybe his health wasn't the greatest. And I just wonder, something like that Horner Magcat, which is such a heavy guitar, you know, I've got one of the replicas. I wonder if the hollow body was maybe just to compensate and take some of the weight off of him as a diminutive guy.
It could be, you know, yeah, he looked thin towards the end. Somehow, though, I remember when I found out he died, you know, he didn't look real sick, and he was still active, you know. I remember a store owner, a friend of mine, called up and he said, one of your customers died. And I remember thinking, what old coot bit the dust today, you know, and they said it was Prince. And I was just like, I was speechless, you know. I mean, anybody can die, but I didn't see that coming, you know. It wouldn't be like if they told you Keith Richards just died.
Well,
you know?
yeah.
So
eventually, I would imagine we'll all live to see that, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it was a shock, you know. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Prince, his taste in guitars, they had to perform, but like I said, they were part of an image. You know, he knew how to create an aura about him. Between he wasn't. If he was just a musician and a singer, well, that's only part of what he was. You know, I think it's easy to underestimate the attention to the image, the controversy in the early years, the kind of sexy thing, all that stuff made him a legend, you know. And all put that all together, that's what kind of puts him on the top of it all, you know.
So can I touch back on a couple of things that you mentioned then? You said you'd done some work on the Hohner, the fake telly. What other guitars, and was this something that happened right the way through his career, that the guitars would come to you for repairs?
Yeah, he was hard on them, you know. He would throw them at the end of a show, and if the guitar tech didn't catch it, well, you know, then the necks would break. All the original ones, they had the necks broken many times. In fact, one of them was sold at auction, one of the blue ones, a couple of years ago, and it was unplayable. The neck was, a guy paid $500,000 for a guitar with a broken neck. You know, you can't play it.
Yeah. Have you been contacted by a Dutch? Yeah, sorry to break in on you, but there's a Dutch fan called Edgar Cruz, and Edgar put together a history of the 4 clouds that you made to try and trace them through the years.
Yeah, I've heard of that. There's one missing, you know. One day after I made the 3 of them, Prince came into the store, and Jeff Hill said to Prince, you know, how are they all working out? And he said, Prince whispered to me that he wished one of them had a smaller neck. So I brought it in and I made the neck narrower, I think maybe a lot. Yeah. And I don't know what happened to it, but that one is missing. According to a friend of mine who was his tech, it was at Paisley Park until about 10 years ago. But
what name would that be, the tech? Was that Takumi?
Yeah, Takumi, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know him real well. And that one is missing. The one, there's one in the Smithsonian, that's one of them. That one that went for, I think, $400,000 to $600,000, that was one of them. But then there's the third one is not around. And I can always tell if they're the ones that I carved. Even the Andy Beach ones, they're different enough that I can tell whether I did it or not. It's just, I can recognize my work and the subtle details, you know.
Yeah. So Edgar's research brought up that the first guitar that you made, which I'd quite like to just ask you a couple of questions before I do about that one. Once you were done with that first original guitar, Did you present it to Prince? Did someone from the production come and collect it? How did that handover work?
I didn't present it. Yeah, they just come and got it. I don't remember much else about that. I, I had almost no interaction with Prince, really. Even when I went to the rehearsals, he would keep to himself. He would stay in the dressing rooms a lot. At that point, he was working out with barbells and stuff. And, you had to get permission to talk to him mostly,
Okay.
You couldn't just come up to him, he was very shy, you had to. Once Roger Sadowski, who made he made that ejaculating Telecaster that was used in concert. He came all the way from New York to confer with Prince, and he was only able to get within about 20 feet of him, and had to have the questions go back and forth with the roadie.
Yeah.
He was, maybe he was autistic a bit. I don't know. Maybe often brilliant people are a little different, But towards the end, he could be on talk shows, and he could be very charming, So he could do it later,
Susan Rogers had a lot of, we had a great discussion with her last month, but you hear different things about Prince and how he was to work with and everything. But did you ever get a phone call at 3:30 in the morning saying, "Hey, can you come down? I need this fixed now"? Nothing like that.
Well, I did have some of the staff come bring stuff and seem very agitated, as though, boy, we got to do this right away. Like I was given the orders from Prince. We got to get this done. Yeah, he wanted stuff done immediately. Yeah, which could be tough at times.
Yeah.
If people don't understand what it takes to fix something, like a broken neck, you gotta glue it back together. You gotta repaint it. That don't happen overnight. So that at times could be a little difficult.
Yeah.
But
So
go ahead.
Sorry, we've got a terrible delay here, haven't we? So I was just going to say that Edgar's research into that very first guitar was, so that guitar, Prince famously smashed it on stage in Japan in 1986 on the final gig of Revolution. He actually broke 2 cloud guitars that evening, but that one was later painted peach and used during the Sign of the Times. It was painted yellow during the Cream era that you mentioned. And then in 1993, Prince mailed it to the Smithsonian, and it's still there at the Smithsonian. So he's managed to trace that single guitar through all those years.
Yeah, is. I've seen pictures of all the paint, because they didn't, whoever repainted it didn't remove the stuff underneath. They just put it on top usually,
Yeah, they x-rayed it, I think, year before last, and they found 7 layers of paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not always the best way to do it, but when you're in a hurry, that's what you do sometimes. You use the preceding layer as a base coat, and you just keep going,
Yeah.
I know on my end I have a couple more questions. Again, Dave, we're very grateful for your time. Was First Avenue your favorite venue to go out and either play or watch bands? What was your favorite venue during the time?
Well, that probably was. It was big. It used to be the bus depot in town. When I was a little kid there, I used to sit on the bench seats with my mom waiting for the bus. And it was a lovely venue. It didn't look quite as glamorous as inside as it did in the movie. But it was good. It had good sight lines. It had a nice stage. And it still does. It's laid out through some dumb luck of nature. Since it wasn't intended as a concert venue, it makes a pretty darn good one. Yeah, it was. I've seen all kinds of people there. And boy, you name it.
I bet.
Good.
My last question for you on my end is, I know what it's like being around guitar all the time. When I had a very busy music school. I gigged all the time. I had to practice all the time. I had a guitar burnout for a number of years, but my question is, as someone who your world is guitar 24/7, do you ever have a time where you're like, I got to step away from the guitar for a week or take a long weekend, or has anything like that ever happened to you?
Well, I'm so busy working now. I don't play much, although I hope to change that at some point. But I never get sick of working on guitars. I'm always trying to get better. When I look at a repair or building something, I think of it, well, it's something to make money at, and I'm going to make somebody happy. But I actually think more about, here's an opportunity. Can I do something better? Can you get out a new tool, or I invent some of my own tools? Can I use some new process? It's like a game I'm playing. I lay in bed if I can't sleep, and I try and come up with stuff. So no, I never get sick of it. No, I've never once. I have it at the shop is in my house, so my work commute is coming down the stairs. And I've never once ever thought, oh, I got to do this again. Huh?
No, it's
I'm
good.
thinking, well, just lately I come up with refrets. I come up with a new thing. When you do a refret on a unbound neck, it's to get the ends and get the sides of the board looking real good. It's tricky because the original frets were put in before the paint went on. But when you're doing a refret, you got to file, and and you're as careful as you can be. And sometimes it don't look quite right. So I got a new way of adding finish over the ends of the sides of the neck, right where the tangs are. So I feel that when you do something and it comes out, I don't want to be an egotist and everything's perfect, but when you do something nice and you've done a physical thing, you made something or fixed it, and you can look at it and it looks nice, you just can't buy that satisfaction of I did this and I come out nice and I polished the frets and they're all even and everything. It feels good. Boy, that's just, you can't buy that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. If only we were all lucky to be able to do something we love for a job,
Yeah, I'm lucky there. I had a girlfriend who worked in a cubicle all day, and boy, she just hated it. If we saw the building at a distance when we were on a Sunday, she'd get all depressed. Right away, as soon as I started taking the pickguard off my Mosrite when I was 15, I started thinking, boy, I think I should be doing this, and it's worked out, Yeah, I feel pretty lucky, and I never take that for granted or stop being grateful that I can actually do something I like, and people like how it comes out,
Yeah, that's fantastic. And while I've still got a few minutes of your time, can I go full Prince nerd on you? In terms
Sure.
of the second and third guitars that were asked for, do you remember the sort of the gap? Because obviously the Purple Rain tour follows the movie coming out. Do you remember, did you go to the premiere of any of the showings of Purple Rain? How did the call for the extra guitars come in?
Well, I remember when they wanted another one, I remember saying to myself, well, I guess he really liked it, huh? Because I made it for a movie and they played it, that doesn't mean that somebody would necessarily want to keep playing it on a long tour. And I remember thinking, well, that's good. And it was in the summer of '84, sometime in the summer, and I made them both at the same time. I remember that. I worked on them both together.
Were they rush
And
jobs as well?
Yeah, I guess. I don't remember that they were the same. It wasn't like he said, well, this time I want something else different. I just did the same thing, and did them. And that's how I do them now. I do them because I've got a lot of on back order. I do, it's not like a factory, but I do the same section to each one. And there's something about doing the same thing over and over to a certain area. It just keeps getting easier, I have these worksheets. Sorry if I'm digressing a bit here.
No, this is
but
great.
I have
That's
these.
great.
I have these forms that I use for each guitar. I got to follow the progress, and then on the back I have two maps of the front and the back, and I have the sections all with like 4 sections on each one of them with letter names, you know, and I do all the one section on each, like 6 at a time. And it just somehow when you divide things up and you have this small goal, you know, rather than just like, here's a whole guitar, I'm just going to carve the whole thing. You're doing these parts. It just goes so much better, and it's psychologically, it's just easier to do. You know, that was a big advance. But yeah, I made the 2, and I got a photo of me that the other store owner took in front. I got the Wendy guitar in one hand, and I think the first of the 2, I'm going down to what was called the Minneapolis Auditorium, and Prince was practicing there, and I took him in, you know, and got him my brand new Honda and took him down, and I remember that day I got to meet Sheila E. and I met Wendy. I remember I kind of started to have a crush on Wendy. Little did I know at that time I would have been totally out of luck. But, so
that was a good one.
She was quite the doll back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made him then, you know. Who would have seen that coming? You know, the Purple Rain movie, obviously the movie company hoped it would make money, but I don't think anybody there thought it would be that big a thing. I think they thought it would be kind of a B movie, you know. It didn't have a lot of famous actors in it.
Yeah, how was it in Minneapolis when that movie sort of exploded?
Well, it was a big deal. You know, like I said, all of a sudden, Prince, within weeks, took Minneapolis from the place that you could play every night, but there was no support. There was nobody in Minneapolis that could ever manage you or produce you or do anything big time. And all of a sudden, he turned that into the center. Entertainment Tonight, different tabloid TV shows, they would come and film me doing stuff. It was a whole different place, you know. It was every day. It was like LA came to here, you know. It turned it into LA for a while.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you went to his birthday gig at First Avenue, which would be June of '85. Were you already making the second and third guitars for the tour at that point, or were you there as a fan?
They were done in '84. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and by '85, I think that's when I made the 4th one, and then sometime in that year, I'd have to look it up, I left. I have a letter from the store owner when I left, a letter of recommendation and all that in there, so I could find the exact date. But after that, I was treated well, but it would seem like I just wanted to move on and do stuff on my own. It was the peak of the excitement was gone, and then the store owners were nice to me, but I don't especially like having a boss, you know. So I wanted to go off on my own.
I do have one more question, Dave, if that's okay. Susan Rogers told us a very funny story about Prince, so I have to ask you, were the ribs at Rudolph's really that good?
It's funny, I saw him there, you know, and most rock stars, they don't want to be seen. They kind of dress down. I saw him in there once wearing the same outfit he had on the cover of one of his albums, like he'd just come from a photo shoot, sitting all by himself.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good, and it was a very stylish place. I saw all kinds of people. Once I was in there, Boss Skaggs was sitting at the next table, you know, and yeah, it was good, and it was a hip, stylish place. It wasn't some old rib shack like down south. It was quite a place. And Prince lived near there for a while too, you know. So it was good, you know. And back then there weren't as many rib places. Now they're all over the place, you know. It was quite the institution. Yeah,
I had to ask.
I had many coleslaws there.
So after you sort of went and set up on your own, did you bring some clientele with you? Or I suppose the question I'm really asking is, you know, how had your clientele changed? Because you're the guy who made this iconic guitar. how quickly did people track you down and say, okay, right, you're the guy I want to work with now?
Well, that happened some, and then I kept doing stuff for Prince and some of the other people. And then I also would do a clinic at a guitar center and store here, and I would go in on Saturdays and do minor setups, right? For free, and then I would give out my cards. But the internet really is in many things really was a huge boost. There's all kinds of things that fans couldn't coalesce before the internet. There's bands. You ever heard of Procol Harum? Do you know who they were?
Oh yeah, Whiter Shade of Pale. Yeah.
They had Whiter Shade of Pale and all that. And they broke up, but then when the internet got bigger, there were so many fans and such popularity, they put together a new version of it, and it just went till recently. Gary Brooker died, but it brought me, the Prince, the cloud guitar and all that. It was still well known, but it wasn't near as big a deal again until number one, the internet brought fans together, and then when Prince died, the two of those just turned it into a bigger thing by far than it had ever been.
Yeah. And in terms of the relationship that you kept throughout the years, would you work? So you mentioned a few people that you'd make guitars and things for. What about other Minneapolis musicians like St. Paul Peterson? Are you the go-to guy for all of these guys still?
Well, some of them moved away. I still done work for people in the Replacements, a couple of those bands of that ilk. See, I'm trying to think. Although I'd have to say a lot of my customers now are middle-aged men and such that have they got good day jobs, and they buy expensive stuff. They're lawyers and doctors. So there's a lot of those. I have Joey Molland as one of my customers from Badfinger.
Okay, yeah, Badfinger, yeah.
Yeah, Joey's lived in town here for about 30 years. I see him all the time.
Okay.
Brian Setzer lives here, from the Stray Cats. Done all kinds of stuff for him, not to him, for his guitars. So that's a couple of local celebrities. Although most people that come to live in Minnesota that are big celebrities, they come here because they married somebody from here.
Okay.
And
what about someone like Corey Wong, who's an up and coming, Minneapolis guy? Have you done any work for him?
I did have recently had sent him an email because he had been out at Paisley Park and he thought he played one of Prince's clouds, and it was one of the, I could see in the photo was one of the Schecter ones, and he complained that it was set up terribly. Yep. And I told him, well, that's not one of mine, and I told him I could sell him one, and I never heard from him again. Did you ever hear the band The Internet? Or a guy named Steve Lacy? He's kind of a modern R&B guy. I'm making one for him. He wanted his in tennis ball green, and it goes in a bubblegum pink velvet case.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I got him. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, the band members that came through Prince's camp throughout all those years, a lot of guitarists, Mike Scott, Kat Dyson, Donna Grantis towards the end. Obviously you worked on her Vox, but there's a lot of bass players as well. Would you work on basses for people?
I've worked on basses probably for the two most famous slapping bassists of all time, Louis Johnson from the Brothers Johnson, who was
Mr. Graham.
Yeah, Larry Graham. Yeah, I've had them both in my shop. Yeah. Louis Johnson said he played the bass line from Billie Jean for me.
Wow.
Because he was what's his name, the producer, he was his favorite bass player. I can't think of his name now, the producer. But I've had them. I've done work for Homer. He's in a new mint edition, and he
I know Homer. Homer Odell.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I worked on his stuff. Prince gave him one of the Korean-made clouds. I worked on that. So I've had him over here. And there are a lot of folk players, but not so many from back then. You know, they've gone and moved away, or maybe they don't play anymore. You know, I don't see anybody from the time anymore. You know, Jesse Johnson. I don't see him. A lot of them moved away. You know. But yeah, still got some interesting guys. It's fun having Joey Mullen, because if you like the Beatles, I try not to overdo it, but it's the closest you could get to talking to a Beatle, because he grew up in Liverpool. He did all the same things in the same places that they did, just a few years later with somewhat less success. But I mean, he's playing on My Sweet Lord. He's on the Imagine album. Yoko Ono got him some cigarettes one night. You know, I mean, he's a lot. He's a really nice guy, very humble, just happy to still be alive and to have some success. You know,
I'll take a look into
the
him.
most
Absolutely.
humble, lovable guy. You know?
Yeah.
Because he's had terrible tragedies in your life. There's two of the guys in the band hung themselves. You know. But he's just happy he's still here, and he's just a lovely family man. You know, he's just a wonderful guy. Yeah. So I still have interesting clients of all kinds.
Yes. So just to fill in a couple of blanks, obviously there's a 30-year career after Purple Rain, and Prince has used a lot of iconic guitars. I would argue yours is the most iconic. In terms of the other guitars that we've seen him with, especially after he changed his name to the Symbol and had the Symbol guitar, did you work on them? Were you asked to do repairs and maintenance on them?
Well, in 2018, Paisley Park hired me to go into the vault downstairs and work on all the stuff. I worked on the original Symbol. I worked on, there was a Telecaster, it was blue with flowers on it. I worked on that. I worked on some Ibanez arch top that he had. So all of a sudden I was working on all of them. That went on for a few months, and then we had a falling out.
Okay. Were they cataloged? Were they cataloged in any way, those guitars? Because I know he obviously over the years he picked up a few sort of celebrity guitars. I know he had one of Elvis Presley's. Were they signed in any way?
No. In fact, when I went down to that guitar room, I thought, well, I thought I would see more stuff than I did. You know, some of it was kind of ordinary stuff too. You know, I saw some Ibanez kind of RG type heavy metal guitar down there. I remember that. It was, but I remember working on the Symbol made by what's his name from he's a German guy that made the original one. Can't think of his name right now, but I worked on a few, you know, but they would be very good. They were very good at cataloging all the stuff. I mean, they had a section upstairs where they had all kinds of his items that they were all in boxes with serial numbers and everything going into a computer, you know. I worked a little bit on the blue Stratocaster that was played at the Super Bowl when it rained.
Yeah.
Wow.
Probably still waterlogged.
They put it away wet and all the paint started to come off. All they would have had to do was wipe it down real well, because that kind of finish would have survived. It would have been just fine. It was all coming off just like you could touch it in the wrong place and chunks of the paint would come off, you know. So I was going to be stabilizing that, although I wasn't around. We had a falling out before that occurred, but I saw that. And he had a few very exotic instruments too, kind of fretted instruments from Islamic world. I can't tell you what they were exactly, you know.
Like ouds and
it was
that type of
down there. There was Yeah, there was all kinds of straps, and he had the drum heads from every band he was ever in, all lined up against the wall. You know, it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Did the estate ask you or tell you why they were asking you to come in and look at them? Because there was a worldwide exhibition, probably around that time, where some of his costumes and instruments went on the road. I saw them in London, and some of the instruments were out. But I also noticed that quite a few of the Mad Cats that you see are actually the knockoff ones. You know, the sort of the post lawsuit headstock gave them away.
Oh yeah,
Where I believe Prince actually had a couple of them, which I would imagine is to hold one up and say, "This is the real one, this is the rubbish one." You know.
yeah. I worked on the original one. You know, that was Takumi brought that in about 15 years ago. At Paisley Park, though, things weren't well maintained. You know, there was no attention to humidity, or even the temperature wasn't that well controlled. The guitars and acoustics were all dried out and cracked. You know, things, even I know a guy that worked on some of the studio equipment. He said that wasn't well maintained either towards the end, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's why I was brought there to try and, you know, they were going to put in humidifiers and all that. And they had quite a plan, you know. But I was there a couple months, I guess, you know. I won't go into all the details, but
Sure.
after that, I wasn't there anymore.
Mhm. So just to, you know, sort of finesse these timelines, the guitars that you would work on, who were the engineers that you would work on, the guitar techs? So Takumi obviously had a decent stint around the mid-90s for, you know, maybe 10
He was there
years or
from
so.
90. He was there
Yeah.
from 98 to 2008.
Would you ever have to go to Paisley to pick things up, or were they always coming to you?
He mostly brought him here. I went out there once, and at that time, I think Prince was living in Canada with, I think, wife number 2. And the place,
Yeah.
there was nobody there. There was a receptionist and one maintenance man. There was nobody else around. The grass was about 3 feet tall. Nobody was cutting it. It was kind of abandoned for a while there. His original guitar tech is dead. I tried to find him, and I can't think of his name right now, but he's not around. And then there would be different ones. You know, they came and went really quick. You know, if Prince didn't like them, you know, if they screwed up once, usually they were gone. You know, but you know, I'd have to say, making the guitars started because I had to change the companies that make the cases for them 3 times. When you care about something and it isn't good, then you just want to move on to the next, you know, because you know, you're not happy, and you got to have what you need or want. And if it's not happening, you just kind of go, well, let's get the next guy, you know. So
Were you
I can
ever
see
lined up?
when you're sorry, you're breaking up a little bit there.
Were you ever lined up to be the next guy? Did anyone ever ask you to be a guitar tech at Paisley?
I was asked to be the guitar tech for Jesse Johnson from the time.
Okay.
And I was almost going to do it, but then I was thinking about it, and a local TV station, they would do kind of a segment on different problems in town. And I turned on the TV one day, and they said, "Oh, Jesse Johnson's band, they're all outside. They're protesting the fact that he's not paying any of them." And I remember thinking, well, I guess I won't do that, you know.
Yeah.
Jesse and I, we got along real well, but, you know, and then maybe it wasn't his fault, but who's ever had the money was not paying. So but I had a chance to go out with the Cars, but I didn't do it for some reason. But that's, you know, I don't know if that kind of life, I don't, it's not for me so much, the constant traveling, and there's not much glamour to it, you know. Takumi, that's, you know, that's his thing. He's good at it, you know. He likes everything about it, you know.
Yeah.
But I kind of like being at home in my shop. I got everything where I'm supposed to be, you know. it kind of
Oh,
suits
I
me
think
pretty
you,
well. Yeah.
I think you've made good decisions. Absolutely.
Mm.
And you mentioned seeing Prince at rehearsal. Was that during those Purple Rain days and delivering or
I
dropping
was
off
getting
guitars?
ready for the I was getting ready for the Purple Rain tour, which I think
Yeah,
started in the early fall,
yeah,
and them rehearsing. And they rehearsed, and then I went to all the shows. He did several shows at the St. Paul Civic Center, and I was at every
yeah.
single one of them, and it was
How did it
fun,
feel to see your guitar being played?
Mm.
Oh, it was fun. It was, yeah, I felt like I'd had a little touch of stardom or had been involved in something that was a big deal, and
Yeah.
I got to know the band, not Prince so much, but I knew everybody else in the band pretty well,
Mhm.
uh, Mark Brown. Andre Simone was especially friendly. I really liked him a lot. He was just a pleasant, upbeat guy, easy to approach.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was, yeah, the whole thing was fun. It was fun all the time, It was around that same time Bruce Springsteen used the St. Paul Civic Center to practice for the Born in the USA tour. I
Yeah.
went to all those shows too, or the rehearsals, and I had actually had Bruce do a private show just basically for me. There was nobody sitting in the whole place, and they went through the whole show, and I sat out in the middle, and they did the whole thing right in front of me.
Wow.
Nobody
Oh,
else
wow.
except the sound guy and
Hmm.
the crew.
Phenomenal. I heard the other
So I could say that.
bit of trivia that it was at that those shows were the Dancing in the Dark, where he brings up Courtney Cox, the famous video of
From
him
Friends.
Oh,
picking someone out the audience. That was filmed at those gigs in St. Paul.
yeah, not to digress too much, but I'll just tell you one thing. When he went to the show, he had this little speech that he made. He'd say, "Everybody, I listened to the radio last night, and I heard this preacher say that rock and roll is bad, and I want to tell you, rock and roll is great." And you would have thought he had just come up with that, but in the rehearsal, he said he stopped and he went, "I listened to the radio last night, and I listened to a preacher." He had it all
Mm.
timed out. He was
Yeah,
like an actor doing his lines, and I thought, boy, he made that very convincing,
yeah.
So
I think
yeah, I did a lot of
another
work for
guy
his
who's
band
who's
too at that time.
yeah. I think another performer who's more shy than you would give him credit for. He's a marvelous showman, but the more I've looked into Bruce, the more you realize that he's really, quite a sensitive artist, really.
What I noticed with his shows is that he kind of dressed more and hung out more with the crew. Where you would have, if you didn't know who Bruce Springsteen was, you wouldn't know how to pick him out, except when he wasn't playing. He just seemed like one of the other guys. Prince
Yeah,
was more, you couldn't, not as approachable at that time, and spent a lot of time in the dressing room, and all that. And he was always creating, he always looking ahead too. They said that the Purple Rain tour could have gone on longer, but he was looking ahead to the next thing.
yeah. I don't think that repetition of the same show with very little fluctuation in the set list really sat well with him, particularly towards the last 10, 15 years. The bands
Yeah,
had to know like 150 songs because they could go anywhere on any night.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
He was
I,
very.
I know we're
Yeah.
taking up a lot of your time, so I've got a couple of questions just to wrap up. Um,
Okay.
in terms of the sort of the iconic guitars and the work that you've done, do you know that Prince fans hold you in such high esteem for what you've actually done with these guitars?
Well, I get a lot of nice love through my Facebook posts and all that. I just had a birthday and I had 125 well wishes, and the people that get the guitars, they're real happy too. It feels good. That's why I hung in there with the lawsuit. It went on for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. People would say, "Oh, Dave, people know you made this, just walk away from it. And I thought, well, I think I got the moral high ground here. I'm not hurting anybody by making these. I never stopped Paisley Park from making their own. The fans, I'm honoring Prince.
Mhm.
The fans love them. It makes them, people that get them are happy. And I'm just, that's all good. And I'm not going to stop. I remember saying to myself, if whatever it is, and maybe I'll even move somewhere else to make them. I'm not going to stop. You know, I said that to myself every damn day. You know,
Yeah.
so I do appreciate that and acknowledge it. Yeah, it's lovely. I have people write to me, not just to get them that don't even. They just want to say hi and thanks. I feel very blessed. A lot of people, you know, like people that pick up the garbage and stuff. Nobody ever tells them they did a good job, you know, or all kinds of important jobs, you know, that people never thank them, you know, and I get that. It's lovely.
Great. And if somebody wanted
Yeah.
to purchase one, I know you've got a bit of a backlog at the moment, but how do they go about making a request to you?
Well, they could go. I have a Rusan Guitar Works Facebook, or they could email me at daverusan@gmail.com, and I would send them a lovely online brochure and answer any questions. Yeah.
Great. And I suppose a final question from me. I don't know how much you sort of follow Prince's music, actually, you know, throughout the years. But do you have any favorite songs of Prince's, or guitar songs, maybe?
Diamonds and Pearls, that era. I like that stuff. And I would say
Yeah.
my favorite thing is the Sign of the Times concert movie.
Mhm.
The first time I saw that actually wasn't too many years ago. I thought, my God, this is like the greatest rock concert I ever saw. It wasn't just a rock; it was like a Broadway show and a play and a concert, and it just had so much. And I thought about how hard it must have been to get all that to come together like that. I was just astounded. I was so impressed. You know, the shows that I saw in the 80s were good, but at that point, it was just, I thought that was just astounding. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be it for me. Yeah, that era.
Great.
Dave,
Great.
thank you. This was just amazing. Listen to all the stories and listen to everything about over your career and about your interactions with Prince and everything. We can't thank you enough for being so gracious with your time.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Yeah.